Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today, I want to talk about a specific book that I read, one that I've been exploring as part of my in-depth kind of exploration of a specific author, which I'll reveal in just a moment. But this book is all about fairy kingdoms and witches. I am referring to Stardust by Neil Gaiman, which was published in 1997. For those who don't know, I've talked about Neil Gaiman on this channel before, highlighting how he is big into writing comics and graphic novels, both for Marvel and DC, and as well as Vertigo. He is noted for the Sandman series, as well as many other comics and graphic novels. He's also gotten some books published, including Ood and the Frost Giants and Stardust here, which I'm talking about, and American Gods, which this was published shortly before American Gods, so that's what the timeline looks like there. Also the Graveyard Book, which I did not like, and so many more stories, which I look forward to exploring as I go along. Needless to say, I really like Neil Gaiman. He's probably one of my favorite authors because he has a way of building upon an already established mythology and exploring it a little bit more in depth, providing life to the myths and the folklore that we talked about in the past. You see that in the Sandman series, you see that in American Gods, and you see that here as well. And I'm pretty sure if we looked into more of Neil Gaiman's work, we'd see that, here and there. I encourage you to also read How to Talk to Girls at Parties, which was made into a movie, but it was also a short little graphic novel that I enjoyed. I don't think I talked about it on this channel, but it is pretty interesting. And so yeah, that's really Neil Gaiman. I always enjoy talking about him. But without further ado, let's talk about Stardust. I will do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So Stardust begins by focusing on the city of Wall in England. This takes place in the 1800s, and what makes the city of Wall interesting is that it has a wall within it that separates the fairy realm from the human realm. But every 9 years, the fairies can come into our realm and set up a market and do commerce, and that's how the two communities can interact, and everything seems to be going well as a result of that. One of the people who guards the wall, Dunstan Thorne, is he's very proud of his job, but he is also very curious about the fairies. He helps some fairies during one of the 9-year periods where they show up, and when he goes to the market, he meets a beautiful fairy woman who he strikes up a bit of a romance with, even having sex with her before she departs. A short while later, a basket appears over the wall with a baby inside it named Tristan Thorne. It appears that the fairy woman had a child, and Dunstan and his wife agree to raise the child, and Tristan doesn't really know about his heritage. However, as Tristan grows up, he becomes sweet on this girl named Victoria, and in an effort to dissuade him or push him away a little bit, because she doesn't really like him the same way, she says that if he goes and catches a falling star that they see in the sky, that he can have whatever he desires from her. Her hand in marriage or whatever she wants. And so he sets off into the realm of fairy, his father noting to the guards, he's returning, which he never seems to question what that means. We also learn that a group of witches are seeking this falling star in order to get its heart, and so that they can remain young forever. And then a group of sons from the Storm Lord King want the star, as the Storm Lord King is dying, and he has said that whoever gets the falling star is able to rule over the Stormlord castle and the land and inside the fairy realm. The Stormlord sons immediately set out, betraying one another, leaving just Primus and Septimus, who are racing to see who gets the falling star first. It's revealed that the falling star is a woman, and she later reveals that her name is Yvain, and she fell out of the sky because someone knocked her out of there. And she really doesn't like to be around Tristan when he eventually catches up to her. She just thinks he's an idiot, and she's worried that he's probably going to use her for ill purposes, although he asserts that he's only going to bring her back to Wall so he can show her to Victoria before he lets her go. They eventually get comfortable with one another, but once he unchains her, because he had her chained, she flees up into the mountains, and it's revealed that she fled into an inn that was actually set up by a witch who is going to try to kill her. But luckily, Tristan travels with Primus, and he doesn't realize that Primus is an important person in this realm. He travels with them to the inn, where an amazing chapter takes place, where a fight takes place at the inn. Unfortunately, the witch manages to kill Primus, but Tristan and the Yvain managed to teleport out of there due to the fact that Tristan set his hand on fire in order for that to happen. There's a ship in the sky, which might be part of a fellowship where they eventually are taken in, and they transport them a good portion across the land. And it's an interesting little ship, but not much else is revealed about it. Tristan and the star run into Madame Simile, who's actually been cursed by one of the witches to not be able to see Yvain, the star, because Madame Simile also wanted the star, but now she can't see it and can't even hear when someone references it. So Madame Simile just transports Tristan and the star back to the market that's about to take place, as some time has passed in the human realm. We also learned that one of the witches has killed Septimus, so it appears that there are no Stormlord children left to rule over Stormlord. And Tristan manages to return to the Wall, where he leaves the star behind to tell Victoria what happened. He learns that she's actually engaged, but if Tristan wants, she can she'll give up this engagement and be with him, mostly because she's worried that she sent him off to his doom. But Tristan is like, I'd rather you get married to this person who really loves you. I have been forever changed by my time in the fairy realm, and I also kind of like Yvain. He also talks to his father, where his father reveals that he is in fact half fairy, and Tristan understands that he kind of belongs in the fairy realm now. And Tristan and Yvain come back together at the Wall and hold hands. Everything's pretty great, and they begin a romance. Madame Simile turns out had a bird, which was a slave woman, and is revealed to be Lady Una, or Tristan's mother. And it turns out that she is one of the rulers of Stormhold, or one of the royalty of Stormhold. And she tells Tristan that it's his destiny to rule over Stormhold now, but he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna go check out the world first with Yvain," and they go do that while Lady Una rules over Stormhold. Eventually, he returns and is a fair leader, but he dies, and Lady Yvain, who doesn't seem to be aging, rules over Stormhold, and it's proclaimed that she's a great ruler, even if she does have a fiery temper from time to time, and that's where the story ends. In terms of analysis, Neil Gaiman does provide us with a bit to think about here, as he usually does. One of the themes that he's working with here is that of magic. So this is a world of magic, and with rules that operate on a logic of magical thinking. There are faerie rules as operated by the faerie, and they have to be held specifically, or something bad might happen, as well as rules and sort of the magic of witches that takes place, which seems to be two separate things. One of the central sort of things that happens in this story is a witch enslaves Tristan's mother. And that's the woman that Dunstan meets 18 years before the start of the story. And like the witch's magic is like, I can only, like, she's only a slave until there is a week with 2 Mondays, and which the moon has lost her daughter. And when Yvain agrees to marry Tristan, and then when Victoria marries somebody whose last name is Monday, that means that Lady Una is officially freed. And the witch is beholden to this magic. If she doesn't adhere to it, then that means that she loses her magic as well. And so not only does she have to, free Tristan's mother, but she also has to pay her for her service because of the way the faerie rules work. And this is pretty much the entire aspect of the story, operating under a very bizarre set of logic, like the power of the word please, where in order to break a chain, all Tristan has to say is please, and that's done. And we often think of like, oh, please is a magic word, and here it is an actual magic word. We also see the character, not really see, but we hear of the character Pan, who is often associated with fairies and magic like that, and how he's urged the trees to help Tristan in his endeavors. So you see that some of the gods are even on Tristan's side here. And then like common human expressions, like if you see unicorn blood, that means there's poison at play or something like that. And Tristan's like, oh, we use that common saying in our back home, and the fairies are like, oh yeah, you turned some powerful magic into a common saying. So highlighting the magic that exists in the world, but also highlighting how there are remnants of that magic in the human world, but we've made it mundane and ordinary, which is something that Neil Gaiman talks about pretty frequently in his writings. And you also see the idea of like this magic dwindling over time, with multiple characters throughout the story noting that in previous ages, like there were more humans, or there was more notice about this magical fairy market taking place every 9 years. But as time has gone on, it's sort of dwindled, and fewer people are showing up, showing that like fewer people believe in the old myths, the old legends, the old stories, and that eventually people might stop thinking about it altogether. What's going to happen to the fairy realm? Is the door to the fairy realm going to close at that point? I think that's a lot of like. That's important to think about. It's something that Gaiman talks about quite frequently in his works. You see that also in American Gods, where many of the old gods like Thor and Odin and the Egyptian gods and all sorts of things like that, they note that the people don't believe in them as much anymore, and there are new gods rising in their place, for better or for worse. And I do like how this takes place a couple of years before American Gods comes out. You can see some of the ideas that he's working with that he fully fleshes out in American Gods, and it's worth thinking about, because we like our ancestors believed in a wide variety of myths and legends, and it's important to think about like whether we still believe them or whether we've adapted them for other things. Another thing we're thinking about is Tristan's development over the course of the story, as well as the idea of the hero's journey that writers like Joseph Campbell with the hero with 1,000 faces frequently talked about. And Tristan changes and becomes better on his journey. He starts out at a very rough place, particularly being very controlling of the star and being very set in his ways. Like, I'm only after to do all of this. I only want to do this to get Victoria's hand. I believe I'm entitled to Victoria, and I don't care about anything else. Like, the star is absolutely coming with me, and like it's indebted to me, and that's the way things have to be. He's kind of an asshole, like an asshole teenager at the beginning of this story. But over time, he does become better at recognizing the star's autonomy, recognizing that she is a person or someone worthy of respect and autonomy and independence, and not just there to benefit Tristan in terms of what's going on in this journey. So allow me to read you an interesting quote from this. "We shall visit my parents first," said Tristan, "for I have no doubt that they have missed me as I have missed them." Although, truth to tell, Tristan had scarcely given his parents a second thought on his journeyings. "And then we shall pay a visit to Victoria Forrester." And it was with this and that Tristan closed his mouth, for he could no longer reconcile his old idea of giving the star to Victoria Forrester with his current notion that the star was not a thing to be passed from hand to hand, but a true person in all respects, and no kind of a thing at all. And that's an interesting quote just because it shows Tristan's development over the course of this story, as I was just talking about. Of course, the issue with that is that it starts Tristan at a very rough place. Like he's very like women are to be objects that I grasp or something like that, and he eventually makes his way to a decent human being, and it's starting him at a very rough place where it's like a lot of people could be turned off by this sort of character, and he's not meant to be the villain or anything, so like why start him off at that kind of weird place? Maybe it's just true to the times he existed in, because, in 1800s, women had fewer rights and were seen more as objects, whereas things have slightly changed in the modern day, especially at the time that Neil Gaiman was writing this, but still, it comes off as a bit wonky just because of how Tristan comes off in being possessive in that sort of way. We see through this that we're witnessing the steps in the hero's journey, where the character goes on a rite of initiation into a mystical land of some sorts, encounters magical creatures and a queen of some sorts. In this case, the queen being the star, and then encountering some ancient evil that they have to fight. In this case, being the witches, although the witches aren't as powerful or menacing as they could have been, in my opinion. And then ultimately coming home to finish the quest, although being resistant to pass over that barrier. You see Tristan being resistant to come home to Wall, and even after he realizes where his true home is, he's resistant to truly come home to Stormhold, because there's more that he could do, that he's changed, and to just be still after traveling for so long, like you're no longer that person that you once were, which I think is great on Neil Gaiman's part for showing how Tristan has changed in his quite extensive journey. I do like some other things about the story, specifically how Gaiman has written the witches as an ancient evil, noting that their true name has been lost to time, and that any remnants of their origins is lost beneath the sea because they've been around for so long. Also, how the interaction that happens with Madame Simile and the irony that takes place there, where one of the witches, because she's angry at Madame Simile, she curses the Madame Simile to not be able to see the star. So when the star and Tristan are traveling with Madame Simile, and the witch asks, "Hey, have you seen these people?" Madame Simile's like, no, I haven't seen a star or anything like that. There's just a mouse traveling with me, because she has turned Tristan into a mouse at this point. And so the witch's magic is essentially turned against her, which I think is really well done by Gaiman here. And then the chapter that takes place at the end is a really good example of setup and execution for a trap that was being set by a villainous character, with the witch ensnaring the star, being disrupted by Primus and Tristan, who have come along, and then the witch executing Primus in a very sad scene, and Tristan and Tristan and the Star doing their best to escape from the situation. Very tense, very well written. I think it's peak Neil Gaiman in my opinion. Shows just how great of a writer he is. Of course, not everything about this book is as good as it could be. Like two issues that I noted. One of them is that Victoria's marriage, where she gets married and engaged while Tristan is gone, is pretty convenient because it forces Tristan to it makes a choice for Tristan in that case. And I think it would have been better if this had been Tristan's choice, like maybe Victoria had offers for marriage offers or something like that, but ultimately she decided to wait until Tristan returned, and Tristan's like, you should probably take one of those offers because I have fallen in love on my journey. Like, make it more Tristan's choice rather than a choice that's made for him, because it just seems too convenient that Victoria is off the market, so he doesn't have to choose between Victoria and the Star anymore. It just feels a bit like bad writing there. And then the other issue is that Tristan, being a royal member of the Stormhold family, is a bit predictable in the story, because at one point the king is addressing his children. There's 7 in the room, like 4 ghosts and 3 human, and he's like, oh, my 8 children, or something like that, and you're left to wonder, well, there's 7 here, where's the 8th child? And then another character, the fairy woman, said that she was kidnapped by the witch when she was younger, and so it's really obvious at this point what is going to happen going forward. And being obvious and predictable aren't necessarily bad things. A lot of really good stories are predictable because they follow the natural progression of how the well-told story is supposed to go. But I do think Neil Gaiman kind of plays his cards a bit early and makes it obvious what is going to happen through the story, and I feel like it could have been written a tiny bit better in that case. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Stardust by Neil Gaiman. A pretty wonderful book, more young adult fiction than anything else, but very powerfully written, and with a lot of excitement, a great plot, and some interesting characters. I definitely recommend that you go seek out this story if you're looking for something exciting by Neil Gaiman. I feel it's up there with the Sandman series and American Gods as some of Neil Gaiman's better work, so definitely worth pursuing there. If you read this before, you simply want to comment on something I said here, do so below. Let's have a discussion about Stardust. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about Stardust and Neil Gaiman if they don't know already. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and fairy-like travels. Farewell.